I'm Dr. Jeanne Safer, and I'm a psychologist. And a psychoanalyst. I've been in private practice in New York City for 40 years, and I've been swimming all my life, but I've been doing total immersion since Terry opened his swim studio, which is about, I think it's about 9 years. I think I was the first student before the place was open. And I came back to swimming. I wanted to learn swimming at a deeper level when I was 57. I'm now 66. So do the math, I've been doing it for a while now. And I really was attracted to the notion of swimming as a mental as well as a physical experience. So what attracted me to TI was that it was, first of all, swimming for adults, swimming for people who think, and people who don't simply want to do an activity, but want something that's important in their lives. So it was the psychological and the mental aspects of the way Terry approaches swimming and of a meaningful life, really life-altering experience that attracted me. I think I saw an ad in the New Yorker, a teeny little ad, and I was kind of interested. And I have a weekend house up here, my husband and I. So we're in New Paltz a lot. And I started studying originally with Terry's daughter Carrie. And I worked with her for about 6 months. So even if you think you know how to swim, TI revolutionizes that. Now, I always thought I was a good swimmer and everything, but I never competed. And by the way, I was only interested in doing this for pleasure and self-enhancement. I had no desire to compete. I've never swum on a team or anything like that. And I had no desire to go fast particularly. Although interestingly, over the years, it turns out I can, which is really quite an exciting thing. One of the things that attracted me to TI was that it was not typical swimming. It was something else, something additional, something much more organismic and much richer as an experience. And I had been dancing for many years. I did folk dancing for a long time, and then I studied Middle Eastern dancing, belly dancing, for about 15 years. And then I had 1,000 orthopedic problems. So I really wasn't able to dance anymore. And swimming in the TI approach really is dancing in the water. And all of the longing for self-expression and movement and body experience, I was able to get through swimming. And I find that it changes and deepens with the years. So now I've been working with Terry, I would say about 7 years, and I have really the honor and the good fortune to, I think, be his most consistent regular student, because I'm up here on the weekends, so I see him almost every week. And the development of our relationship and our dialogue about swimming and the meaning of it has been a very important part of this. I can only say it's a mental, emotional, and physical experience really like none other, because there's something about being in the water, particularly with the kind of mindfulness that Terry talks about, that it amazes me that people say they're bored when they swim, that they need a television set and an MP3 and to do mathematics tables. Like, they can't stand it because it's so repetitive. And I'm thinking, anybody who does TI thinks this is a joke, because you're so involved in every movement and the meaning of it and the feel of it that the idea of being distracted by watching something or listening to something seems preposterous. The only thing I want to hear is a tempo trainer, which gives a beat like a metronome. And this is one of the things that Terry uses. It helps you kind of focus your movement, focus your thoughts, and it also helps you get a lot faster. And as I said, being fast was never my goal. So that's one of the thrilling things about it. This method is so profound that you have gains in your movement that you never intended. So I'm swimming at really serious speeds. I wouldn't say effortlessly, but certainly not effortfully. And it's remarkable. I mean, to feel so fully alive and vital in another medium at a time when most people I know are winding down. No, it's thrilling. And Terry's whole philosophy of how he approaches swimming is as a lifetime experience. One of the most interesting things about TI, which after you learn some of the basic ways of moving, is Terry's philosophy about it, which is that injury is opportunity. So anything that's a problem in the way you move and things that are going on with your body is an opportunity to learn more about how to move, how to make use of it, how to overcome it. And in the second half of life, that's really important because everybody has stuff. And so TI is the kind of movement that you can do with joy and power your whole life, almost regardless of what you go through. Anything that's as organismic as total immersion swimming has to affect you emotionally as well as physically. And the experience of becoming, I wouldn't even say an expert swimmer, but a swimmer who can't stay out of the water, which at least a very enthusiastic one, has given me a different image of myself. I've always been able to dance, and I've always, I've taught, I speak in public, I've done things like that, but I never thought of myself as an athlete. And that, at this time in life, to experience yourself as not only an athlete, but at times thrillingly good one. I mean, I'm not trying to brag about it, but it's exciting to see how fast I could swim and how beautifully I could swim and how wonderful it feels. It's a remarkable experience. I mean, the notion that you can live at such depth, literally, as you age, and that you can learn things and change in profound ways, physically as well as mentally, is such an essential thing, and I feel it's a privilege to be able to do that. I start a workout at the pool that I swim at in New York. I lose sense of time completely. I have no idea how much time is going by. The experience changes from you. It's interesting because in Terry's method you work on focal points and very specific kinds of things for lengths of time. But when you put them together, you don't think about how your arm is going in and how your leg is moving and how your head is. The whole gestalt changes. The whole feeling of moving is what makes it such a unique experience to me of any kind of movement I've ever done. And I also refer a lot to the kinds of experiences I've had swimming with my patients. It's become part of, I try to get them all in the water, of course. And for instance, there's so many metaphors that I find that swimming that you could use from swimming for your life. Like one thing that I was talking to Terry a few weeks ago about, and we never run out of things to work on either. You'd think in 10 years you'd pretty much learn it, but oh no. Because he's always developing it. So I said, Terry, I'd really like to get faster with my freestyle. My breaststroke's always been pretty fast. Freestyle hasn't been. And he gave me this unusual cue, which was, the tempo trainer has a beep, right? He said, try it at a much faster speed than you think you could swim. So usually what you do when you're trying to get faster is you go incrementally down by 1/100th of a second. He said, go down from 1.2 to 0.9. That's a huge jump, right? And then he said, when you go back up, you'll find it easier. Now this is not the way you typically learn to go faster. So I thought, all right, he said so I'll try it. And I tried it. And I would say that within 2 swims, my speed at which I could swim without exhaustion and staying on the beat doubled, which says that there are lots of ways to learn and you want to access all of them. And so what I say to my patients about that is that sometimes pushing yourself beyond what you think you can do allows you to know that you can do things you didn't think you could do. Bar none, the most difficult things I've ever been through are that 2 years in a row, which was 2010 and 2011, I had 2 different cancers. In 2010, I had breast cancer. And then in 2011, I got the rarest form of leukemia, which happens to be, fortunately, the only curable form of leukemia. But through that, I was hospitalized for a month, and then I had a year of outpatient arsenic treatment. The breast cancer was 6 weeks of radiation. I mean, that seems like a picnic compared with the other. But through both of those things, Terry knew about them both, and we agreed that I would work as normally as possible through my lessons on a weekly basis. As long as I could get in the pool, I was going to have a lesson. And to say that that got me through was an understatement. It was an extraordinary experience. I swam athletically, if you can imagine. I learned things. When I would come directly from the hospital, and my husband and I come up on the bus. So I would be so exhausted from the treatment in the morning that I had to sit on the floor of the bus terminal. I would come up here, I would get in the pool, and I would swim for an hour. And I assure you, there were a couple of occasions where I was exhausted, but mostly you would have never known. That's the power of this. And what this allowed, and I think this is important through any kind of injury. I had a million orthopedic injuries, and we've always talked about how to manage them, but this was life and death. And I felt that I was living the entire time, and not only was I living, but I was learning, and I was defying. I was defying everything that was trying to destroy me with Terry's help and with the help of this kind of swimming. And that is unbelievably precious and rare. And then when I came back to it after being cured of both of these things, I mean, I took off like a rocket. So those are the biggest challenges that I've experienced. And it also gives me faith that whatever other things life has in store, I'll be able to swim through them.
You know, Jeanne developed cancer, 2 different types of cancer, and continued to swim through the cancer and use that as her one of her healing outlets. And at this coach summit that I was at, she described the endless pool as her injury or illness-free zone. And I just thought that was amazing. So here's this woman that's dealing with 2 different types of cancer, and she was in the midst of getting chemotherapy almost daily, several times a week for several months. I think she was maybe 10 to 12 months in chemotherapy. But she described the pool as her illness-free zone. And I thought this is really amazing. If every patient who had any kind of illness, a terminal illness, a long-term illness, battling with cancer where you don't know the outcome, if they had an illness-free zone that they could go to reliably and be there, it would be a miracle, I think. I see so many patients in the emergency room. Obviously they come there because they're not feeling well, but I see so many patients sort of on the downside of that don't have any hope. And so to see swimming be that one thing for Jeanne, to me was just, I don't even have a word to describe it. It just made me feel like my heart was this big and sort of bursting out of my chest when I heard her describe that. And again, I'm getting goosebumps because the one thing that allowed her to do that during her chemotherapy was that she had a port implanted. A port is access to your bloodstream that goes into your heart so they can deliver the chemotherapy medicines right into the heart, into the large blood vessel, without injuring the veins in your arm. And that port goes into your skin, and it's tunneled under your skin and implanted into your chest, and it's sewn in there. It may sound a little barbaric, but it's actually a very nice, easy way for patients that need to have a lot of chemotherapy, a lot of blood draws, a lot of blood transfusions. It's a nice, easy way for them to live a normal life and still go and get that therapy where they can just access that port that's designed to get into their bloodstream. Well, Jeanne didn't have that option originally. When she was first diagnosed with this leukemia, they had recommended a peripheral catheter, which is a catheter that goes in the arm, and it's sewn in down here, and it comes out of the skin, and it's got a sterile dressing on it, and it needs to be changed. Sterile dressing needs to be changed, and the ports that come out need to be kept clean and sterilized, and it's just high maintenance, especially if it's going to be in there for 10 months. And this line goes up through your arm down here, so if you lift your arm up, the length of that catheter can change, and the catheter can go down further into the heart and back out. So swimming is probably not a good idea. And I had not met Jeanne at this time, but our first interaction, she had posted to the forums. I knew about Jeanne from her YouTube video, The Perfect Pitch, and Terry and I had then had the opportunity to talk about Jeanne and how much she loved and enjoyed swimming, and I knew a little bit about her first cancer journey. She posted on the forum about having this PICC line placed, this peripheral catheter, and how the doctors recommended that she not swim. And this is the first time that I'd seen her post on the forum, which I thought was fairly interesting. She's asking for help. So I'd never met her before. I wasn't giving medical advice, but I thought it was really important that she get the right advice from someone who understands both sides of the process, understands the medical side, but also understands the swimming aspect and the joy of being able to swim. And so I said, I don't think it's smart for you to swim with this PICC line. I think you should listen to your doctors because it can be dangerous, it could damage the heart, it could get infected. So she took that information, unbeknownst to me. She went back to her oncologist, and she had done a little bit of research, and she demanded that a port be placed. And they eventually did it, but it was not something that they had offered. They never said to her, look, if we put a port in instead of a PICC line, you'll be able to continue your daily activities. Their scope of awareness is on the chemotherapy and the medical treatment. So Jeanne had taken the advice that I'd given her, which, the advice was not to swim, done additional research, found out that she could have a port by talking to other patients, asked for the port, and they put it in, and that's what started that additional year of her illness-free zone. So at the summit in New Paltz in June of this year, I was listening to her tell this story, and I realized that I was the person that had sort of interacted at this pivotal point. And she didn't remember my name, she didn't know who I was, she knew that it was a coach who was a physician. So she's giving this presentation, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and when she brought that up, she says, I don't know who it was, and I just sort of gently raised my hand, and it was just a wonderful moment of community and connection with swimmers. And I've never experienced anything else that allows that sort of communication, not just on a physical, technical level of teaching swimming, but on an emotional and lifestyle and wellness level as well. The moment when she recognized that I was the person that had posted on the forum to give her that information, I was one of those moments where my heart started racing, like your heart starts beating out of your chest, where you're the chosen one. And I wanted to say something, I wanted to acknowledge that it was me, and I wanted her to know, because I felt that it was probably important for her to not have it be this mysterious stranger that she would never know. And I didn't realize her husband was sitting right next to me at the time. So it was just a nice sort of, there was definitely some unspoken communication in eye contact and in hugs afterwards. But at the same time, I have to admit, it felt kind of nice to be acknowledged for that little piece of information that I may take for granted as a physician, but at that time it was the right piece of information for her.
That I experienced water as an illness-free zone, and it's also, because it's a gravity-free zone, you have an experience that's unlike any experience you can have on land, because you're suspended. And if you give into the water and allow it to suspend you, and don't fight it, but move with it, it's such a profoundly meditative state, because you're alone in a way that you're not when you're on land, because you can't talk. You can't see very well. So you're relying on the sensation of being embedded, of having all of your skin being touched by something, and as a feedback, the water and you are in a dialogue, which we are with air too, but you don't feel it the same way. In the water, it must be what birds feel in the air. That's all I can tell you. It's such a powerful internal and a sense of oneness with an environment. And you don't swim, you swim through the water and with the water. And what I've experienced in the last few months is that the water surrounds you and buoys you up and carries you. And it's sustaining. And of course, remember, we all started out as swimmers in utero. So it's a very primitive fundamental experience as well. And to recover that as an adult it's miraculous, really. Well, this was something about working with Terry in which Terry was not actually present, but Terry's spirit was present and Terry's philosophy was present because it was a dream that I had about Terry. And it was a dream that I had about Terry when I was just beginning my outpatient treatment with arsenic for this type of leukemia. And in the dream, and of course I wrote Terry this dream as soon as I had it, he and I were on a course, a swim course. It was an open water course, like the English Channel, I suppose, and something hellaciously difficult. And there were cliffs going down to the course, very difficult cliffs. And then you could see in the distance the end of it, and you could see cliffs that you'd have to clamber up. So you'd have to clamber down cliffs to get to the course, and then you have to clamber up them to get out, right? And he and I were at the beginning of this course. And he looked at me, and he said, and he pointed to these hills, and he said, "There's much to be learned from these daunting cliffs." And this was what got me through this treatment, because what he was saying, which is true of all of total immersion, any cliff that you go through in life, any challenge, any difficulty, physical, mental, whatever, it's a learning experience. And it can be very daunting, but if you approach it as something to learn from, it changes your whole attitude for going through it. So I think that was the most remarkable experience from TI that I've ever had. Swimming makes me feel alive in a way that I think few people are privileged to feel, and that anyone who swims with total immersion as a guide will naturally feel. It's a sense of physical freedom, of power, of joy and movement, it's an aesthetic thing as well as an athletic thing. It's the most beautiful way of moving I can imagine. And it's exciting. It's sustaining, it's soothing. When I'm trying to write something and I'm having trouble with it, if I get in the pool, I always come out. I have ideas when I'm swimming. Even when I'm thinking about all these focal points, you're in a state of unique concentration and unique joy.
Jeanne is someone who has been a serious student of this for 9 or 10 years. She's very unusual in terms of her unswerving commitment to be a serious student of swimmer. She doesn't mean to be an athlete. She has no intention to compete or anything like that. All she wants is to be a serious student and continue for life to be a serious student. So because Jeanne and I have had a weekly lesson almost weekly for 9 years or so, we communicate on a far more subtle and nuanced level than I would be able to communicate with someone who is not as long-term and serious a student as Jeanne. I mean, we often communicate, we talk as much about her level of perception and what she can do to deepen her level of perception and how she can distinguish between this really fine sensation and this really fine sensation than we do about the movement itself. We're talking about her thinking process and her process for sensing what's going on.